Storytime with Liana. So I use storytelling and the experience that so many of us have as the alchemy to just bring you the diversity of experiences, and the most important thing I think is the diversity of experiences that other people have lived in their bodies. It's not just stories or words. Stories are, as you can hear in the background, the emergency, as you can hear in the story, tucked inside the story are the experiences of other people. So for centuries and eons, we've been telling stories. And even though they're just words, or they're the most beautiful words, many of us have heard stories since we were children, and then suddenly our parents stopped telling us stories. And I often wonder, why do we stop telling stories? Why do we not sit around in the evenings anymore? Because we now have televisions and we have phones and we have iPads. And so I wanted to start storytelling time with Liana because I think that it's one of the most precious and beautiful gifts. It's a way to communicate. It's a way to connect. It's a way to become cohesive as a family. And it's a way to commit to one another. You know, we used to do it through storytelling. We used to do it through reading books. We used to do it through cooking. And now our families have scattered all over the world and into the wind. And we barely have dinner together, which is so sad. So I wanted to start storytelling time because my vision is that we gather here, even though I don't know you're watching. I want to share stories with you, and then it'll be like a pebble in your lake or in your world or in your ocean. And then you pick that pebble up and then you go give it to somebody else. So they'll all have there'll be different topics. There'll be different domains. There'll be different, from different backgrounds, from different people. Many of the stories that I'm going to be telling you are going to be stories that actually have either happened to me or to people that I personally know, which means I've either been there or I know the person who experienced the story. And that's a really important point. And the reason why this is so important is because when we have experienced a story or a narrative, that it stays in our body. It stays with us. It lives in the left ventricle in our hearts. And then when we re-deliver it to someone else, all the tender, soft, gentle emotions, all the joy and the sadness and the anguish and the claiming of those emotions hopefully comes through the story. So this first story that I'm about to tell you didn't happen to me. It is a true story based on a retelling, on a raconteur from a friend of mine who wrote a book, The Courage to be Brilliant. And in that book, she writes a story about a young man. And so let me give you a little bit of context around the story. So the reason why I tell this story is because I believe that words have power, and especially the words our parents. So those of us who are the higher generation and we have children and we have grandchildren and nieces and nephews, when we become aware that what comes out of our mouth falls into the child's lap and then shows up in the child's life, then we have a very different kind of agency over what we say to people. It doesn't just happen with our children, it happens with everyone. So what falls out of my mouth has creation. It's like a seed that falls into the ground, and then the world waters it with whatever the circumstances are, and it starts to blossom. It can blossom in a fantastically beautiful way, and it can blossom in a very detrimental way. So words have power and agency to do that. And the story that I'm about to tell you about this young man who was a little boy when the story happened has to do with what we choose to believe what other people tell us. So we were all children. All of us or most of us have children, but we were all children at one point. And if you can remember back to when you were a child and what people said to you, how you heard it, how it felt in your heart, how it felt in your ears, on your body, how it landed, did it feel full of love, or did it feel full of compassion? Did it feel full of hatred, anger, dismissal, disdain, hurt, pain, cruelty? What was it? So some of us go back in our childhood, into our childhood and into our history, and we have a complete embossed imprint on our heart in moments that happened. And most of us, when we remember, the things that we remember aren't so great. They're very painful. And the context of this whole story is that we can actually listen to someone say something. We can either let it go, or we can totally hold on to it. And the reason I want to tell you the story at the beginning of this journey is because this child went through a lot of anguish and a lot of turmoil, but chose to hold on to one or two sentences that a total stranger said to him. So sit back and listen. Once upon a time, there was a little boy, and he lived with his mother, who was a single mom, a single very angry mom, a mom that didn't see the future for her son as bright as he saw it for himself. And he was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and he had such a thirst for learning and a desire to be in the world, and he was curious and he was alive, and he wanted to not only learn, but he wanted to experience the world. So he was constantly in his head, or in the fantasy, or in his heart, or in a dream. And then he would wake up in the morning and he would say to his mom, "Mom, I'm going to learn how to write." And she would get so viscerally angry. You know, she would show him how angry she was, because she said, "How dare you even think that? You are just a mediocre little boy. We don't have any means. I don't have means to send you to school. You will never become anything. We don't come from a background where you can even dare to dream that." And this boy listened, but he never backed down. And he kept this dream afire in his heart, and he wouldn't let go. One day, his mother takes him to the market with the little bit of money that they had to buy food. And while they're standing at the market, the young boy stands in the middle of the market, and the gaze of an old woman seeks his attention as he looks across the market to look at the apples. And she's standing right next to the apple cart. And her gaze was so intense that it drew the little boy to her. And it draws her to him, and they meet in the middle of the market. And this old woman, totally frail, totally silver, totally very gentle in her voice, she cups the little boy's face up to her, and she looks into his eyes as she holds his chin lovingly, and she says, "You, my son, are going to be the ambassador to the United States of America, and you will represent our country." Now, this interaction was very short and very sweet. And the reason why it was short and sweet is because the mother had seen this interaction, and she came running for her boy, and she yanks him away. She heard what the old woman said, the old woman who was a soothsayer. She heard it, and she said, "You are never going to amount to anything. Don't let anybody put that garbage in your head." But the little boy was afire with joy. And that's the only thing he could think of. So much so that those few sentences and that intentionality that the woman placed into his mind and his heart and his being took over, and he figured out a way to run away. He ran away from home. He got picked up by nuns. They sheltered him. They took care of him. They sent him to school. He went on to go to college. After college, he went on to study further. He went on to become a learned professor. He went on to become the ambassador to the United States of America. It was a South American country that he lived in. So I tell you this story because out of all the detriment that this little boy went through, out of all the sadness that he could have clung to, out of all the pain of his mother's beating, out of all of those experiences that he had, the one thing that he stuck with was his dream that he didn't let go of. And the next thing was the soothsayer's words. I love this story, and I love this story for so many reasons, and the biggest reason why I love this story is because it always reminds me and invites me to listen to the goodness in the world, to not listen to the naysayers, to not listen to your own doubt. Take your doubt and usher it out. Take that which is good, true, and beautiful, and it lives in your spirit and it lives in your heart. Take it and take the weeds out and take the pure, beautiful, amazing seed and nurture it. And I say that in this Christmas season because so many of us, the doubt grows even further. You know, we're alone. We don't have family. Family's far away. We're by ourselves. Friends don't always have time. And it's easy to become doubtful. It's easy to become doubtful about life, about friendship, about connection, about relationships. And I want to just share with you that I see you and I know who you are, and that we all have the agency and the capacity to make life brilliant and beautiful. Listen to the beautiful God voice inside you because it's your voice. Happy holidays.